Okay, welcome. If you're watching this training video, you are most likely a contractor who has the eCMRA requirement on your contract. This is a DoDEA's specific training for eCMRA. There's a lot of trainings out there for from the Army and the Air Force, but this is specific to our agency, Department of Defense, education activity, because there are some specific DoDEA requirements that you'll need to know. So let's get through this training. This is a video training in addition to all the guides that you have at your disposal as well. So we're going to start this training with a background of the manpower reporting requirement, just so you as the contractor know why we are requiring this from you and your contract. 2 and 3, these two sections are the sections that we will focus on the most. Registering an eCMRA, which presents some problems if you don't register the right way. And then a detailed walkthrough of the eCMRA reporting will be the main focus, so you know exactly what you're going to be doing when you report. Section 4, the bulk loader and running reports, we'll go through that briefly because the user guides at your disposal will be able to explain that a little in pretty good detail. And then finally, we'll just cover some summary slides. We're going to talk briefly about manpower reporting, the background of why we are asking you to put your manpower hours into eCMRA. In 2008, Congress passed the National Defense Authorization Act, which required the Department of Defense to submit something called an inventory of contracted services to Congress every year. And even further step back on the background of this, Congress was getting concerned about the level of contracted services the Department of Defense was engaged in, and there wasn't really a system in which to measure how many hours we were contracting out. So when Congress asked the DoD, hey, you're contracting a lot of services, can you give us an inventory? And then they found out that the Department of Defense did not have an inventory. This is when they came out with this NDAA 2008, which said, give us an inventory every year. Another reason for this ICS requirement is, as of now, the Department of Defense contracts out more services. They spend more money on services than they do supplies. So that means that we spend more money on contracted services than we do major weapons, tanks, airplanes. So that's very significant. And what we're trying to do, and what Congress is statutorily requiring us to do, is come up with an inventory so that we keep track of these contracted services. The bottom line for this slide is to let you know that this is a statutory requirement for the Department of Defense. This is something that we have to do. Okay, so this inventory, it includes direct labor hours of all of our requirements and industries. And that's in the unit of measure CFTE, which is contractor full-time equivalent. 1 CFTE equals about 2,088 hours, I believe. And what that unit of measure is supposed to represent is the level of work for one contractor full-time for 1 year. Okay, and that has been chosen by Congress as the unit of measure for an ICS. And of course, it has cost data as well. Direct labor hours, so that's something that you'll be putting in eCMRA. That is compiled in the ICS, and we take that from eCMRA. I'll talk about that in a minute. The real purpose of the ICS is to take all the data that's input by all the contractors and make major top-level decisions on workforce shaping and budgeting and future acquisition planning. And I wanted to stress this because we're not singling out any particular contractor or contract when we get this information. That is not at all the purpose of getting this information. We compile so much data that it is a bird's eye view. Not one particular contractor is singled out or focused on. There's just too much data for that. All of the hours submitted by the contractors are compiled and aggregated into this ICS. I want to make that point especially because I want to encourage all contractors to submit accurate data, as accurate as possible, and not to be worried that we're going to be using this data for negotiation reasons, for leverage, Nobody's going to be using that for anything against the contractor. It's going to be used as the ICS only. And as we'll see in another slide, no one can see the major elements that you put in for direct labor hours and direct labor cost. One other point I'd like to make about the review of the ICS data for major workforce shaping decisions and future acquisition planning is that the accuracy, reliability, and the effectiveness of these decisions is dependent in a large part on the reliability and accuracy of the data that you are submitting into eCMRA. The more accurate your data, especially on the three elements that I'll talk about later, the more effective the decisions that the government can make, which will save taxpayer dollars and make for more effective and cost-efficient contracting. So that's very important. So the Department of Defense was assigned and mandated from Congress to come up with this ICS every year, and the way they responded to complying with this statutory law is to create this eCMRA application, which the Army created, and require all DoD services and Department of Defense agencies, which includes DoDEA, to require their contractors to use eCMRA, specifically to enter manpower hours in eCMRA as part of the performance of their contract. Okay, so you'll see the highlighted language here. eCMRA is required for all instruments of services, regardless of value. I'll talk about that in a minute. And every component, including DoDEA, is required to put this in the contract and have the contractor perform manpower reporting as part of their duties in the contract. This is how we are reporting to Congress. So that is the main background, just so you know why you have this requirement and what purposes you're serving in giving us accurate data as part of your manpower reporting. I want to mention 4 basics of eCMRA before leaving the background. And this is just so you know the basics of the requirement that the DoD passed on from the statutory law from Congress. The first one is that we have to report manpower data for every services contract regardless of value. Now that includes supply contracts that have services. Now there is talk about a National Defense Authorization Act provision that will raise the threshold of this to $3 million. And by the time I'm giving this training, maybe that $3 million threshold is in effect. And if it is, then it's $3 million as the threshold. But for now, it is every services contract regardless of value. The reporting period for eCMRA is a fiscal year. A fiscal year, as you probably know, is October 1st of the previous year to September 30th. So the fiscal year of FY16 is October 1st, 2015 to September 30th, 2016. The reporting deadline then for eCMRA, and this is in your contracts as well, it's the 31st of October after the close of the fiscal year. So for fiscal year 2016, it ends in September 30th of 2016. And that means you have a month from October 1st to October 31st of 2016 to report your manpower data for the year 2016. The fourth thing is that eCMRA manpower reporting requirement must be included in all service contracts. This is a requirement for us to follow. And by putting it in the contract and by you performing these services, you are ensuring compliance with statutory law. Before moving on to registering in the system, when you get into eCMRA, which we'll talk about in a minute, the first thing you see is this disclaimer, and it basically says you are entering a government system. The government can do what they want with the information. We just want you to know that. And it kind of scares contractors because what you're submitting, some of this information, is you're breaking down your firm fixed price. And that's not common in a commercial marketplace. When you give us a firm fixed price, we usually don't require you to break it down any further than what you've given us, except unless in situations where we can ask for other than cost and pricing data. But usually the firm fixed price is the firm fixed price. So when you're giving us something like a labor hours or labor cost, that seems to go against commercial practice. But as you see from the backgrounds, it's a requirement in the government, and this is what makes government contracts a little different than the private marketplace. But also, it's important to clear the myth that the information that you're putting in eCMRA can be seen by anyone in the government. That's just not true. There are 3 elements that you are going to enter in eCMRA: the invoiced amount or total invoiced amount, the direct labor hours, and direct labor dollars. These 3 elements cannot be seen by anyone except for the person in the role who compiles the ICS. And at that point, that person is far removed from the contracting process. They can't use that information for any kind of leverage or negotiation purposes. Your core, your contracting officer, they will be able to see everything else you put in there because it's not proprietary. But this information, your total invoice amount, direct labor hours, and direct labor dollars, that information they won't be able to see. They'll know that you have, whether you have completed it or not. When you complete it, on their end, it'll just say in that field, it'll have the word entered, and then they'll know you did it. But they will not have access to actually the fields or be able to see the numbers. Okay, let's talk about registering in eCMRA. This is a big issue with the DoD portal. There are 4 portals for eCMRA. We use the All Other Defense Components portal. You see that red square there on the slide. That is the portal you need to enter. Now, this has been a problem because in the past, the guides that have been submitted in eCMRA have directed contractors to the Army portal, directly to the Army portal, without going first just to the general eCMRA.mil screen. The reason why is that this was an Army system, and so the guides are Army guides, but this wasn't caught when Army told everyone they could use their guides. So when we used the guides and passed them on to all our contractors started submitting all their hours in the Army portal, and it's turned into a big mess. So first, go to www.ecmra.mil. The website there is the site you need to enter. And then when you see this screen with the 4 seals, go to the bottom and select All Other Defense Components. If your URL has Army, the word Army in it, you are in the wrong portal. It's incorrect. You can tell you're in the right portal if your background is blue. If you are in the portal and your background is green, you are in the wrong portal. That is the Army portal, and we are not the Army. Make sure your background is blue. You can also go directly to that URL, the address up there. You can jot that down. That will take you directly to this screen here, which would be the same thing as if you were to go to ecmra.mil and select All Other Defense Components. So again, if you have this blue screen here on the disclaimer screen, then you are in the right DoD portal. Please make sure you are not registering in the Army portal. I'm not going to spend too much time on the registration. The guides themselves do a really good job explaining and walking you through the process of registering. Again, this is the screen of registering into the DoD portal. Make sure that there's a blue background. Again, use the user guide if you have any questions or the details of registering, but you're going to enter all this information in and hit continue. You'll have to put in your cage code. There's a little link that says click here. Sometimes that link does not work. So if you don't know your cage code off the bat, off the top of your head, and you can't find it by clicking here, it won't take you to a site that is functioning, then you'll just have to go back to your SAM account, System for Award Management, or ask someone in your company who knows your cage code, but you will have to put that in. And then you will receive a notification letting you know that an email will be sent to you and you can continue the registration process. Okay, this is the main portion of the training, entering information, the Manpower report, the details of entering your Manpower report correctly with DoDEA. So let's go ahead and begin. You have your username you have your password, you have properly registered in the DoD portal, not the Army portal. You are registering under contractor. You're going to put your information in and hit submit. You're going to go into your contract search screen. This is the first screen that shows up. So if you want to create a contract in eCMRA, even if the contract does not yet exist, you are going to search for it and hit search. And then it's going to tell you it doesn't exist, as the next slide will show. And you will click that you want to create one. But no matter what, you'll have to put your contract number in under the contract number field and search for it. We put our contract number in and we put search, and it says your search did not return any results. Please click here to create a contract. Okay, so this is a situation in which that contract number that I put in does not exist, and so I'm going to create a new contract by clicking on that blue link. Okay, this is the screen where you create a contract. You see the contract number there is at the very top. Contract fiscal year is the fiscal year in which the contract was awarded. It'll only be at the prior fiscal year. So you see that 2016, I'm making this training in FY16. You will not be able to go any further back than the year that you're currently in. So if you're reporting or creating a contract that was made before, just put the year as the earliest year that you can. It's not too big of a deal. And then notice here the NDAA elements that are completed by the government. You do not have to worry about this box right here. This is going to be submitted and completed by the government. There was a question from a contractor recently that they said, I'm all ready to do manpower reporting. I got all my information, but I'm waiting for the NDAA elements to be filled in by the Corps. And so I let them know, you don't have to wait for anybody. This can be blank. You can just continue and do your manpower reporting. This thing can remain unfilled, it can remain blank, and you can still submit your report. So please continue without this block. You can just ignore it. So all you're going to be doing on this screen is putting in your contract number and then putting in the contract fiscal year and then hitting Save Contract. And then you have a contract in the system. So let's go back and search for it. We're going to put the contract number in the contract number field. And then we're going to hit search. So here we have the contract details screen. This is after you search for a contract and you select it, and this is the screen that it will take you to. So you'll see contract number, you'll see the contract fiscal year in which it was awarded. In this case, it was 2014. And then you'll see order numbers under this information. Now, if you are creating this contract for the first time, you won't have any order numbers. You'll need to create the order. Also notice the NDAA elements. You will, again, ignore this information. This is for the government to fill in. Okay, so let's focus on the orders for just a second. You see these orders here. These orders are the manpower reports that you submit every year for this particular contract. So you notice this contract here has a manpower report that was completed in 2014 and another in 2016. Okay, so if you're creating a contract for the first time, you are going to select Add New Order, and we're going to go through the order process. When you create new order, you're going to come to the Order Details screen. You'll see your contract number. You're going to put the fiscal year. This time, it's the fiscal year that you are reporting. So in this situation, it's 2016, but it's whatever year, fiscal year you are reporting. The order number, if you do not have an indefinite delivery contract like an IDIQ where there's multiple task orders or a BPA where there's calls, if you are just reporting on one contract for that year, then you are going to put 4 zeros. The order number will always be 4 zeros. If you are reporting on task orders and you have an IDIQ with multiple task orders for that particular fiscal year, that is where your order number will be different. Your agency command will be DoD Education Activity. It is not Office of the Secretary of Defense. look for DoD education activity. It is there. That's another common mistake. If you cannot find DoD education activity, it's likely that you are in the Army portal. You need to get out and register under the DoD portal. We'll talk about searching for UIC in just a minute, but you see you put your contractor company name, and then we'll talk about the total invoiced amount in a minute as well. Once you select search for UIC, you see the screen where you're actually going to look up the UIC. The UIC for DoDEA is always going to be the same. It is HE1254. And all you have to do is type HE1254 in the UIC block and select search for UIC. And the UIC will pop up under the search for UIC button and the search results. Then just select that blue link, HE1254, and your UIC will show up under requiring activity UIC. It's HE1254 DoD education activity. So that is the way the command and the requiring activity UIC should look. It is very important that you put this information in accurately because it is the only way that we can extract the information you are putting in. Please take the time to put this information in correctly. Okay, so let's look at total invoiced amount. If you remember, I mentioned three things that are the most important that you will be reporting. It's also the protected fields that no one will be able to see except for the government officials preparing the ICS. Okay, one of those things is on this Create Order or Order Details tab, and that is the total invoiced amount. The total invoiced amount is the dollar amount charged to government for work performed during the fiscal year. It's fully burdened. It includes things like materials, overhead, labor, G&A. The total invoiced amount must be greater than or equal to your direct labor dollars, which will be entered later under the Location Data tab. Okay, it's important to note that the total invoiced amount is only for invoices for work performed during the fiscal year you are reporting. Okay, so let's say you are reporting under fiscal year 2017. The work started in 2016, FY 2016, and crossed over fiscal years into 2017. For your 2017 report, you will only be reporting on the services performed in FY 17. You will not include any invoices for work done in 2016 portion of your performance period. So that's important because a lot of our contracts cross fiscal years. When you're doing a Manpower report for FY 17 or FY 18 or whatever fiscal year it is, you are just reporting on services done in that fiscal year only. Another point I want to make, total invoiced amount must be greater than or equal to your direct labor dollars. We're going to talk about labor dollars later, but labor dollars represents the labor cost only. So, if you are making your total invoiced amount the same value as your direct labor dollar amount, that means you are not making a profit on the contract. It says greater than or equal to, but really, the total invoiced amount must be greater than your direct labor dollars. We'll talk about that later. So you have all your order details. It's time to create your order. When you create your order, you're going to see 4 tabs. These 4 tabs make up your Manpower report. Now the good news is, one of the tabs, Fund Cite, you don't have to worry about. You can ignore. Another tab, Order Data, the first tab, you've already completed when you created your order. So really, we're just concerned with tabs 2 and 3, Contact Data and Location Data. So let's talk about Contact Data briefly. The contact data is very straightforward. We won't spend a lot of time on this. I just want to mention, though, that all 3 fields must be entered by the contractor. A lot of contractors just submit their own contact information under the contractor, but the contractor is required to also submit the information for the contracting officer and the contracting officer's representative. And really, you should have that information. since you're in regular contact with them usually. If you don't have the information, contact your the government contracting office, and they will provide it. But it is your responsibility to submit the information for all three of these fields. And then you can see save for each one. The location data tab is the most important tab in your Manpower report. And you'll see right when you click on it, there's nothing there. You need to add a new location. There is a different location data entry for each location that's part of this order. If you have a task order that is performed in multiple states, you will have to perform Manpower reporting information for each of those states. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So go ahead and click Add New Location. Once you select Add New Location, this is what your screen is going to look like. It's going to have all this information you need to submit. And it actually goes really fast. So we'll go through this pretty quickly. But I want to make some points that lead to confusion if you don't know how to enter this in properly. So let's talk about the first part of the Location Data tab. We'll talk about FSC in just a minute. So let's look at the location part. And I'm talking about the city, the state, zip code, the country. You'll notice in this example, the location is in Japan. If it is a different country that is not the United States, all you need is a country and a city. If you are reporting on work performed in a state, you will need the zip code and the state as well. So go ahead and put that information in, and then you're going to select Search for FSC. When you select Search for FSC, you are going to have to find your FSC and select it. This is one of the things you'll have to contact your contracting office to extract from them. The FSC needs to be the same Federal Service Code or FSC from the contract. And it could be that you don't have this information, but your contract office will always have this information. And in fact, the templates that we provide to the contracting staff to send to you should already have the FSC in there. So you should have access to this already, but you're going to have to search for it even if you have it. So in this example, we're using V212. It's a common FSC we have for our bus contracts. First, you're going to have to say, my FSC is not listed. Search for FSC at the top there. And you're going to hit select. Then it's going to go into this FSC search menu. Now, before you actually type in V212 or whatever your FSC is, you will have to select the service category. And so you're going to have to know the industry in which you work. It's not separated into the different letters like V, U, and I wish it was, but it's not. So you're going to have to go into the scroll bar and you're going to have to find your industry. So if you're doing busing contracts, you're going to select Transportation, Travel, and Relocation Services as your service category first. And then you're going to put V212 in the code and then select Search for FSC. And you will see V212 right down there. Now let's talk about direct labor hours and direct labor dollars. We already mentioned that total invoiced amount was one of the most important fields you can enter for Manpower reporting. These next two are the other two that make up the three most important fields. They're also the three, as we mentioned, protected fields. You will need to enter accurate direct labor hours and accurate direct labor dollars. Direct labor hours is the total number of labor hours performed at the location that you are submitting for the particular FSC. The direct labor dollars is the unburdened dollar value of the direct labor for the location and FSC. Just a technical point, make sure you don't put any commas or dollar signs. Write the numbers in this slide as it's shown in this slide. I would also avoid decimals. Just round up to where you don't have decimals. Again, I'd like to mention that the total invoiced amount that you put in earlier must be greater than. I'm not going to say or equal to. It must be greater than your direct labor dollars. To come up with the direct labor hours, there was a lot of questions about this, and all I can say is that the government keeps it very flexible in the way that the contractor comes up with the direct labor hours. But I will say that these hours need to represent the total number of hours dedicated to that particular service in that location. If the contract was for bus services in Japan, for FY17, say, you need to put in the labor hours, the total number of hours dedicated to bus services in FY17, in that fiscal year you're reporting. Okay? Another really simplified way to explain it, if it's a 4-hour job requiring 2 people, you put in 8 hours. I wish it was that simple all the time, but that's, you're including all employees, all hours dedicated to that service. The total labor dollars, you take that total amount and you can multiply it by an unburdened dollar rate. So you take your labor rate and you strip it. You strip away the G&A, the profit, the materials, everything. It can only represent the labor. And then you multiply your labor hours to your unburdened labor rate, and you get your direct labor dollars. I think I used $15 as my unburdened labor rate in this situation, and I got $146,000. This is the most challenging probably to collect, but again, this is the most important field. Please make sure you're entering this in accurately. Okay, the next question's here. Weapons support system will always be none. We don't order weapons in our school systems. Questions about contract performance. It should usually be in A, but there is one field in the scroll bar that is for expert and consultant services. We do have some of those contracts. If you are a contractor that is doing consultant services and expert services, just make sure you're putting that in instead of in A. Government supervision should always be no. I don't know why it says yes there, I'm sorry. Supervision, government supervision, means the level of supervision is almost to the point where it's an employee-employer relationship. The government, here in DoDEA especially, we treat all our contractors as if they're independent contractors, and so government supervision should always be no. Government tools and equipment should be no as well, usually, but we do have situations in which we provide our own equipment and tools to the contractor for use and the performance of their contract. If you feel like the answer is yes, contact your contracting office first, just to make sure. And then government facilities should usually be no as well. The only times where it is yes is when the contractor actually works regularly in a government facility. They have a workspace dedicated to them. I think this goes beyond just having a closet for custodians. We're talking about a desk job where it's as if that person is working at the installation. That's what we're talking about by working at a government facility. We do have these as well, but most of our service contracts, the answer should be no. We have all the information put in, and I'd like to mention that direct labor hours and direct labor dollars are the most important fields, so please take your time and put this in accurately. If you go back to the location data tab and you have more than one location, you're going to have to submit add new location for every new location. So in this scenario here on the slide, we have a bus contract with services that are in Simbach, Germany, Japan, Kadena, Japan, and Fort Benning, Georgia in the United States. You'll notice that the ones in Germany and Japan, there's no state and zip code because that's not required. But in the states, the United States, we have to submit the state and the zip code. So if you have multiple locations in one country and it's all from one district office, you can just put the name of the district office and have it as one location entry. But if you are performing services in 2 countries, you definitely need to separate those 2 countries. But if you're just working in one country and you have multiple locations in that one country, you can just put the district office where you got the award. So you don't have to put an entry in for every city. That applies to states as well. If you are performing lots of services in North Carolina, for example, just put the district office in which the contract came from, and that should be okay. Okay, as we mentioned before, the Fund Cite tab you can just ignore. And actually, DoDEA can't even use this tab. It's only compatible with the Army portal, which means the Navy, the Air Force, the other DoD agencies are not able to take advantage of this Fund Cite Data tab. It's not necessary for manpower reporting. It's not necessary for the compilation of the ICS. You can just ignore this and move on. It won't prevent you from successfully submitting your manpower report. I'd like to mention just two tools you can use for manpower reporting: the My Reports and the Bulk Loader. The Bulk Loader you can find more about on the user guide, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you'll see on the right-hand column under New Feature, there's a little blue link where you can select Bulk Loader. This is a situation in which you have an order that you're creating with multiple locations. You have a lot of different states or a lot of different countries in which you're reporting. You can use the Bulk Loader template and upload all of your information easier by directly putting into the eCMRA system. You'll notice on the screen there are two blue links. One says Bulk Loader Template and one says Bulk Loader Instructions and Code Lookups. Those will provide you with the tools you need, and then you'll see there you can upload the file. I do not recommend this. If you have a contract that even it's an IDIQ with 10 task orders for that fiscal year, I would still recommend manually putting in those task orders. The Bulk Loader is very sensitive on the information that you're uploading, and you'll have a lot of errors if you don't do it perfectly. But if you feel that you like this tool, please use it. It'll work if you do it correctly. This is the way the Bulk Loader template looks when you open it up and use it properly. You'll notice the different locations there you can put in. You can even put it in by different order numbers. If you have a lot of orders, you can utilize the Bulk Loader for this purpose. Again, unless you have a lot of orders to create, such as a BPA with about 30 or 40 different calls, I would suggest not using the Bulk Loader and just putting your information in manually. A final tool is My Reports. You can run reports to keep track of all of the contracts that you're trying to submit into eCMRA. If you have multiple contracts with the Department of Defense or with DoDEA, then you can use the My Reports to find out what the status is. If a manpower report or an order is not complete, it won't show up on the report. So that's one way you know whether your reports are complete or not. If it doesn't show up on your report, then you need to go in and complete some fields. This is the way that DoDEA also checks and sees what contractors are missing reports, which ones have done their reports and which ones haven't. Okay, that concludes the training. Thank you again for your diligence in getting this done. Just as a reminder, you have until the 31st of October to report all your manpower hours for that previous fiscal year. And again, the government appreciates your diligence in helping us comply with the statutory requirement. And if you have any questions at all, please contact the Policy Office of DoDEA, and also look at the user guides for further details and guidance. Thank you.